Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
From her rich and fertile valleys to the shores of her icy seas, from her fields and farms and shellfish beds and her many nurseries, for the finest of her flavor, for the freshest by far, choose the things Alaskans bring to the market where you are. Products that we're proud to call our own, and it's all Alaska grown.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. On fire danger map here, really wiped out pretty much from what it was yesterday here. Still some high stuff up over the northern upper Yukon Valley, possibly the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. Otherwise, less fire danger, but still right about the same area here, the Copper River Basin, and some here around the Anchorage, Palmer, down across Turnagain Arm of the high variety, also up there over the northern southeast coast. Yesterday's satellite imagery showed clouds, showers, and thunderstorms here in the east, a break from Arctic Village southwestward to some good sunshine that extended from the Pribilofs right across Bristol Bay, much of southern Alaska, and clouds and sun over the southeast coast. Up to the northwest, moisture streaming southeastward into the interior, which today, overnight last night and today, spread a fair amount of rain in all the way from the Bering Strait eastward across Fairbanks on over to the eastern interior. Break behind this thing up there along the north slope today on down into Arctic Village. A lot of temperatures bounce back into the 60s up there, but definitely cooler, upper 30s around Barrow. And still pretty nice here over the Bristol Bay area. Kodiak Island, west-northwest winds allowed temperatures to rise to 77 degrees this afternoon at the state airport down there, and brilliant sunshine and clouds and again sun over the southeast coast. Sunny areas, temperatures rose to mostly into the 70s, and cloudy areas mostly in the 60s, and some sun here along the North Gulf Coast, Copper River Basin. A lot of high stuff coming south of the mountains into the Susitna Valley, dropping down into northern Cook Inlet this afternoon, and to a lesser extent over Prince William Sound. On the chart, here's that cold front. Again, everything pushing eastward, but the pattern gradually shifting southward in time. But the main rain area, moderate to heavy amounts, anywhere from half to upwards of an inch of rain falling from the northwest interior in toward the central regions there. Pretty gusty southwest winds as well. Unalakleet seeing west-southwest gusts of 40 miles per hour earlier today, and 20 to 30 mile an hour winds across this portion of the state. Galena, I believe, had gusts up to about 30 miles an hour. Strongest wind gust up there over the Kaktovik Barter Island area this morning reached about 51 miles per hour as that low center tracked off to the east. Otherwise, pretty light winds for the southeast coast, but windier. Gales today across the Barren Islands, and gale warnings are out for the Barren Islands tonight, tomorrow night, and on Tuesday. So the winds are going to hold and be quite brisk down across Kodiak Island. High pressure out over the Bering Sea. Kind of a weak trough right through here, but really just clouds covering just about everywhere out there. Some patchy areas of low clouds and fog. Some areas the clouds a little thinner, Alaska Peninsula and back along into Bristol Bay. Looking at tonight's forecast, we'll see that front edges a little bit to the south there, keeping the rain in over the St. Lawrence Island area up to the Seward Peninsula, eastward all the way to the border, with showers back behind from the Brooks Range into the Kobuk-Koyukuk Valley areas. Still drying out there along the Arctic coast, and then it looks like some more moisture poised to move on down. So keep it IFR along the central Arctic coast. Clear skies, variable high clouds, southern Alaska, all the rain staying north of the mountains or northwest of the Alaska Range. Definitely dry out to the deltas, but look for this onshore flow to carry some of the low cloud deck inland during the night tonight with fog along the coastline. Chance of shower there over the Aleutian Range, otherwise just cloudy, dry for the Alaska Peninsula. This moisture streaming northward brings a chance of rain later tonight into the eastern Aleutians, fair over the Panhandle, and tomorrow that will make for kind of a wet day across Unalaska over into the Alaska Peninsula. Some of that edging northward toward the Turbulence, but may not make it. High pressure holding there, very light winds. Lots of low clouds and fog IFR right up to the coastline. This front coming a little bit farther to the south, bringing the rain probably up to the northwestern Alaska Range, keeping conditions wet through the Tanana Valley and from, say, Northway, Tok, all the way up to just south of Arctic Village. Showers over the North Slope, breaking out here in the northwest. Sunny and quite warm again, Kodiak Island, southern Alaska, all the way down to the coastline. Look for a mostly sunny day for the Panhandle tomorrow, with most of the convection staying along or east of the border. And for Tuesday, a little more in the way of clouds into the Copper River Basin. And tomorrow night, some moisture could get as far south as Chilitna, and that would be about it. That'd be very light. But for Tuesday, that front kind of just goes to pieces here, leaving showers behind, mostly cloudy conditions. Drier, though, for the eastern Tanana Valley, 40-mile country. Risk of an afternoon thunderstorm over the eastern border, but nothing too extensive. Look for mostly cloudy, an increase in the clouds from what you'll see tomorrow here over the southeast coast, with maybe some shower activity showing up, especially down here over the southeastern portions and also up to the north. But northwest winds make for another sunny, warm day for Kodiak. And same thing here for south central Alaska, Kenai Peninsula, and Prince William Sound, looking pretty good even right up into the valleys. Nice conditions back here to the north and northwest, but rain holding on, the remnants of that frontal boundary, keeping it damp, cloudy, occasional IFR and fog, the Bering Strait right down across Norton Sound, across the Nulato Hills. Out to the west, pretty good storm lifts northward across the western Aleutians, so look for some northerly gales on the back side of that thing, and southerly winds 30, maybe 35 knots here along in advance of the front. Definitely rain pushing into Adak and Atka. Some warm front type weather will brush across the Fox Islands there. High pressure along the coast here, holding back to the west a little bit. That's going to keep the low clouds and fog right up to the coastline. Again, probably spilling inland, but cutting off along the Alaska Range there, so areas east of the mountains should be sunny and warm once again. Temperatures across the state today, south central Alaska into the 80s in some locations, 82 at Big Lake, 81 down at Ninilchik, and Port Ellsworth, a warm spot in the state, 84 degrees this afternoon, a lot of 70s, 66 in Kenai, 69 at Cordova, but Valdez up to 72, 76 in Portage, and Gultacana 76, McCarthy 70, the southeast coast, Sunshine, Metlakatla 77, Stewart 79, and 75 at the state capital. Otherwise in the mid to upper 60s elsewhere, 70 degrees at Northway. Then you get into the clouds and precipitation as you head west. Temperatures drop into the lower 60s, into the mid to upper 50s, back to the southwest. McGrath still up to 70 today, and Holy Cross 72 degrees. Up to the north, 50s to lower 60s across the interior. Eagle 64, 60 degrees at Umiat Airfield, Arctic Village 64, 37 at Barrow, otherwise in the 40s, 50s back to the northwest, all the way down the coastline there. Kipnuk pushed up to 67, upper 50s for the Pribilos, 50s and lower 60s here for the peninsula, otherwise 50s for the remainder of the area. Lows for tonight, 30s along the Arctic coast, locally the North Slope, otherwise 40s south of the Brooks Range, mid to upper 50s all the way down to the Gulf of Alaska, upper 30s, upper 40s to lower 50s for the Bering Sea and Aleutians, 50s for the southeast coast. Highs tomorrow, 70s here across much of the Panhandle. Looks like the warmest areas, again approaching 80 down over the south part, and 70s to lower 80s again south central Alaska, Susitna Valley. Same thing for the Copper River Basin, 70s into Bristol Bay. Cooler marine layer keeping it in the upper 50s, lower 60s there along the southwest coast, and cooler up to the north, still 50s to lower 60s. 30s along portions of the Arctic coast, warmer inland. For flying weather tomorrow morning, lots of IFR, Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, right into Norton Sound. That will include White Mountain, Golovin, Nome, and those areas, right down to Nunivak Island, more IFR over the Pribilofs, and here with that moisture coming northward, pushing up to the eastern Aleutians. And then that patch up here over the north central interior tomorrow morning vanishes. We've got marginal VFR along the frontal boundary there through the central interior. And IFR, again, Norton Sound, back across St. Lawrence Island. IFR kind of flirting with the coastline there in the Arctic, and IFR also along areas of the Aleutians, especially over the south central Bering Sea. Passes Anatuvik, marginal VFR at times, occasionally marginal for Adigan as well. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, but rainy VFR, conditions deteriorating, possibly going marginal VFR in the western entrance. And for windy, VFR becoming marginal VFR tomorrow, and chance of IFR possible, or actually pretty likely on the northern entrance at some point in the day tomorrow. And for Isabel, marginal VFR in the north entrance, otherwise pretty good to the south. Mentesta, another VFR day, as for Tanita and Portage. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, 14,000 feet here, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, the peninsula. 12,000 feet crosses the Sitna Valley, say Squintna, drops back to about 2,000 to 4,000 feet up along the Arctic coast, and cooler pool out here, way out over the far western Aleutians, but still 8,000 feet. Icing here with that narrowing band of moisture from St. Lawrence Island back into the interior, shoots off to the northeast there, above about 8,000 feet up in that area. Occasional rime, light rime icing, could be some isolated areas where it's moderate. And the winds aloft, good flow through the interior, 100 to 120 knots at 33,000 feet, ridging through this area, northwest winds, dropping way down to the south there. And here's that low that will be pushing northeastward and bringing the stronger winds into the Aleutians on Tuesday. For 9,000 feet, northwesterlies, 45 knots right across the Barren Islands there, and another band westerlies continue, 30 to 35 knots through the central interior, lightening up and picking up a little bit here on the eastern Arctic coast. Light for the Panhandle, pretty good over the Bering Sea, pretty light winds. Got some westerlies at 25 here to the north, southeast, maybe up to 30 toward Amchitka. And for 3,000 feet, high pressure, no problems out west, and westerlies 25 to 30 through the central interior, dropping off, picking back up to 40 knots there from Kamishak Bay across Kodiak and the Barrens, lighter for the southeast coast. Turbulence-wise, of course, with that band of strong winds, could be some light to isolated moderate turbulence from the border there, southwest, Norton Sound to St. Lawrence Island, maybe along the eastern Arctic coast. Lee side stuff here with those northwest winds, the Kodiak Island area, and some approaching the central Aleutians. After the break, I'll be back with marine forecasts.
For flight crews of turbojet aircraft taking off at or near maximum gross weight, or in the final stages of landing, a sudden change in wind speed and/or direction in a short time or distance along the aircraft's flight path can be catastrophic. At the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, a program called the Joint Airport Weather Studies, and dubbed the JAWS Project, was established to investigate the magnitude of the wind shear threat in an aviation environment. Their early analysis led them to the conclusion that some types of wind shear, such as terrain-induced shears, nocturnal jet shears, sea breeze shears, and even the majority of warm and cold frontal shears were most often within the performance capabilities of aircraft, if anticipated by flight deck crews. So the JAWS research focused on those wind shears associated with convective storms, wind shears called microbursts, which seem to pose the greatest threat to aviation. A microburst is produced by the downdraft from a convective cell. As the vertical downflow nears the ground, it spreads out in all directions, causing a horizontal outflow and creating a situation where an aircraft attempting to penetrate the microburst would encounter the headwind, the downdraft, and the tailwind in a very short time and distance. At low altitude, on approach or departure, the resulting loss of airspeed can cause an accident. During the late spring and early summer of 1982, around Denver's Stapleton International Airport, the JAWS team brought together a collection of scientific equipment not previously used in this manner for wind shear research. Probably the most important of these tools was Doppler weather radar, which allowed the researchers to observe and record the directions and speeds of winds associated with convective storm cells moving through the area. Their findings were both impressive and surprising. Dr. John McCarthy, a pilot and meteorologist, was one of the directors of the project.
In our analysis of the JAWS results at Denver Airport, we found that there were many microbursts. It was very surprising to us, the number that we found. For example, we expected to see 10 to 20 microbursts in 90 days, and instead we saw 150. So there were many times more microbursts than we anticipated. We found some fascinating things. We found that microbursts can be incredibly intense, that the wind speed change when you fly through a microburst could be in excess of 100 knots in terms of wind speed. We know microbursts are very common here in Denver. We know from an experiment conducted in 1978 in the Chicago area that approximately half the number that occur at Denver occur at Chicago. That's still plenty of microbursts. We know from the accident statistics that microbursts occur anywhere where convection is occurring. We know that they occur in New York, St. Louis, Atlanta, Miami, New Orleans certainly, Tucson, and Salt Lake. We don't know all the places where they're occurring because we haven't set up all this fancy equipment. But when we have, or where planes have gotten into trouble, we have come to the conclusion that you can expect microbursts anywhere where there are convective cells, whether it's in the United States or anywhere in the world. One very interesting fact was that the average microburst during the JAWS project at Denver was 50 knots. And sad to say, that's stronger than the estimated value that brought down Pan Am 759 at New Orleans in the summer of 1982. So an average microburst is quite capable of destroying an airplane. In our careful look at our microburst statistics, we found that they don't last very long. They last 5 to 10 minutes. One of the most interesting things is that when a microburst first hits the ground, it's not as intense as it's going to be in the next 5 minutes. This is a very important finding because the first encounter, if it has just hit the ground, is half the intensity as it's going to be 5 minutes later. And several pilots have gotten into trouble by saying, hey, there's only a 20-knot shear, I can handle that, go into it and find out that it's a shear you can't fly through. Microbursts tend to occur in families. Not always, but oftentimes. We found that at Denver, that the presence of one microburst on some days was followed by the presence of many more microbursts, up to 15 on a given afternoon, often bunched into a 1 or 2 hour period. We conducted the JAWS project at Denver in 1982. In 1984, we were given the opportunity to test some of our concepts in short-term forecasting, detection, and warning of low-altitude wind shear back at Denver. For 45 days, we brought our research results to Denver in a real-time operational test to see if we could provide quantitative information to controllers and hence to pilots regarding the presence of wind shear. And we found that Doppler allowed us to come up with a 2 to 4 minute advanced warning of a microburst encounter by an airplane. And in fact, it was so successful that in one case we got a report back from a 737 pilot that said that the existence of that advisory saved his airplane from crashing. That's awful good news to people working in this kind of safety environment. My message to you as a pilot and it's to you as a controller, is to find ways of keeping aircraft out of microbursts. Avoid, avoid, avoid. That's the name of the game.
Awareness and avoidance of wind shear are important steps in being able to cope with it effectively. At many airports around the United States, the Federal Aviation Administration has installed low-level wind shear alert systems. At strategic points around the airport, remote anemometers measure wind speed and direction. They're usually located near the middle marker, but take into consideration terrain and other conditions unique to that airport. The peripheral wind information is continuously compared to readings of the center field anemometer, and if the differential exceeds a preset threshold, an alert appears in the tower cab. At two airports, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Denver, Colorado, the existing systems have been enhanced with additional detection stations to improve the system's ability to detect microburst wind shear. The low-level wind shear alert system is but one of the tools at your disposal. Remember, however, the absence of an alert does not preclude the presence of wind shear. If wind shear alerts are present, exercise extreme caution and look for other clues that may indicate the severity of the problem. For instance, we know that thunderstorms with heavy rain may include microburst wind shear. However, in some areas of the United States, you may encounter microbursts in much less severe conditions with little or no rain. These are called dry microbursts, and in these situations you may see precipitation trails or virga getting close to the ground but not actually hitting it. Below it you may see blowing dust. And if you have a situation like this, where you can actually see a ring of dust, it is a clear sign that there are extremely strong and localized winds. In other areas, you may see trees blowing out or flailing wildly, again a sign that extremely strong localized winds are present. Another source of wind shear information is pilot reports. Professional flight crews in particular are urged to make PIREPs. The recommended method for wind shear reporting is to state the loss or gain of airspeed, the altitude at which it occurred, your location, and type of aircraft. Since wind shear is such a dynamic phenomenon, PIREPs must both be made and disseminated as quickly as possible. There are also other potential clues as to the presence of wind shear. For instance, by examining the takeoff or landing path on your weather radar, although you cannot detect wind shear as such, you may see strong radar returns from thunderstorms which are sometimes associated with severe microbursts. Be aware, however, microburst wind shear can also occur in weak echoes, or in fact, with no radar returns.
West 10 to 15 on the north coast, northwest 20 down to the south. Northerlies 10 to 15 over the inside waters. And for Tuesday, very light west-southwesterly breezes here along the coast, and southeast 15 for Clarence Strait, south 15 also for Stevens Passage, and light winds for Lynn Canal. Light winds for northern Cook Inlet, and then some light westerlies through Turnagain, turn northwest up to 20 for Prince William Sound, northwest 15 here, the eastern North Gulf Coast. And we got small craft advisories, which turn into gales for the Barren Islands. Small craft advisories, Kodiak Island, right up into Kamishak Bay. And for Tuesday, Cook Inlet, westerly 10 to 15, northwest 15, Prince William Sound, 20 knots for the North Gulf Coast. Hold on to the gales for the Barren Islands, and 30 knots for Kodiak Island, southwest 20 for Shelikof Strait. Bristol Bay, west 25 knots tomorrow. Same thing here from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. Lighter winds back to the west. And for Tuesday, west to southwest 15 to 20 for the peninsula, west 20 Bristol Bay, and small craft advisories Sitkinak to Castle Cape. And for the Fox Islands, south to southeast 15 to 20 knots tomorrow. Easterlies picking up to 25 knots here south of Adak and Atka. Otherwise, easterlies 20 knots, the remainder of the area to the west. Then we've got north 35 gales out here for the far western Aleutians, south to southeast 30 knots here from Adak all the way over toward Nikolsky, and then front Alaska Island, southwest 25. For the southwest coast, west-southwest 15 to 20 knots. Small craft advisory, St. Lawrence Island into the northern Bering Sea. And for Tuesday, south 20 for the Pribilofs, St. Matthew Island, southwest at the same speed for St. Lawrence Island. And up along the Arctic coast, brisk wind and small craft advisories here for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline there. Westerlies 25 to 30 knots, seas up to 6 feet here. And dropping off back to the west, 15, turning northwest from Cape Beaufort down to Wales. And then Tuesday, light winds here from the west on the west side there. Then small craft advisories again here for the central and eastern coast, 25 to 30 knots. With again now seas up to 8 feet, a little higher than tomorrow there for the open waters areas on the east side. And for tonight, rain possibly moderate here, especially out to the west, continues to stream eastward. The whole pattern trying to shift southward, breaking out to some showers up to the north there. Fair variable clouds here, southern Alaska. Quite windy again, the Barren Islands, Kodiak Island area. And a few clouds for the southeast coast. And then for tomorrow, looks kind of wet here. Some moisture slips up from the south to the eastern Aleutians, maybe the Alaska Peninsula, far western peninsula. Narrowing band of rain now, especially back here to the west, coming down to the Alaska Range, off to the northeast in that position there, clearing out back to the northwest. Fair and mild, again, 70s and 80s, southern Alaska. Another nice windy day for Kodiak Island, and mostly sunny with 70s for the Panhandle. A few more clouds the next day there with a chance of some scattered showers. Another pretty good day here. Warm temperatures, south central Alaska, Prince William Sound, Kodiak Island. Some rain persists here to the northwest, clearing out now over the north central interior areas.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.